and welcome to the Moffitt Method Podcast, where we dive deep into the world of strength and conditioning and pushing the limits of athletic performance with your host, Joe Ryan. Each week, we'll explore the strategies, tactics, and innovations that make athletes stronger, coaches smarter, and the sports we love even more thrilling. Whether you're a coach, an athlete, or just a fan of the game, we've got something for you. We'll be talking to some of the brightest minds in the industry, sharing their insights and experiences, and uncovering the methods behind the madness of high-performance sports. So tune in, turn up the volume, and let's get ready to learn, grow, and be inspired. This is the Moffitt Method Podcast.
Today, we welcome in Coach Ross Garner to the Moffitt Method. Coach is the athletic performance coordinator and assistant football coach at Effingham County High School in Georgia. Previously, he was the strength and conditioning coordinator at Cleburne ISD in Texas. He has also spent time as the assistant athletic director and director of strength and conditioning at Southwest Florida Christian Academy in Fort Myers, Florida. He has spent his career coaching between the high school and collegiate levels, working with a variety of sports. Coach Garner is CSCS certified and a member of the National High School Strength and Conditioning Coaches Association. Welcome in, Coach Garner, man. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Hey, Coach, man, I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, man. You know, you've been someone I followed on, I guess they call it X now. You know, it'll always be Twitter and always be the blue background to me with the little bird. But I've followed you on X for a while now, and you're definitely someone that when we kind of started bringing this podcast back was definitely on my list of people that we had to have on just because of your wealth of knowledge and where you've been and everything you've experienced in your career.
You know, we've been around a little bit. It wasn't in the plans, but you know, here we are.
Yeah, man. So tell us a little bit about that, man. Obviously, you've been in Florida, you've been in Texas. Now you just made the move to Georgia.
Yeah, so I got into this whole thing at Longwood University, interning under Rick Canner. He's now the, I guess, deputy AD at Jacksonville University down in Florida. I was with them for a few years in undergrad. Spent a very brief time not in strength and conditioning, and then came back and spent some time at Liberty under Bill Gillespie and worked over there as well as in club sports. Then, like you said, I went to a high school down in Florida, was a strength coach and assistant AD there. Then went over to Texas as a strength and conditioning coordinator over in Texas for a couple of years. And then, now we're over in Georgia. So all in, I guess this is somewhere in year 11, year 12, something like that of doing this thing. Coached a few sports along the way. So I'm back to coaching football now. When I was in Virginia at a high school, I was coaching football, wrestling, and lacrosse on top of doing the weight room stuff. So yeah, we've done a little bit of everything here, but glad to be kind of settling in here to Georgia and what we're doing.
Yeah, man, you've seen some of the best high school football in the country, you know, between Georgia, Florida, Virginia even has a great football, and then Texas. You know, obviously when people think about high school football, a lot of them think about the state of Texas. So you've seen some of the best football in the country.
Yeah, it's been it's been really cool on that end. So my dad was a head football coach for a while, and it's, I feel like every football coach's son gets into coaching in some capacity,
right?
And I always tell people, man, Florida was a great experience. It got me back in high school. And the thing I always say about Florida is, and kind of like everybody knows, is, the speed in Florida is just unreal, right? Like the amount of speed that's in Florida in the skill positions. I mean, you throw a rock and you hit a legit 4.3 kid, 4.4 kid in high school. And the speed's unmatched. You can't beat that. You go over to Texas, and one of our ADs in Florida, he had coached in Texas, and he always said that it was the linemen and the QB play that was always impressive, and he was not wrong. I mean, the lineman play and the QB play, I think, is unmatched in Texas. And then you come over to Georgia, and we've had 2 games under our belt. To me, in Georgia, man, it's defensive linemen and it's backers. Like, it's the mids. Like, all those cats, man, they're just freaks. When you get, these 200+ pound kids that are jacked and they can run and they can jump, man, it's just different. And as far as like the culture of things, man, the investment in Texas is crazy. Obviously, there's a ton of money in it in Texas, and the amount of resources that they put into football. But that waters down into the other sports. I mean, really, just the total investment in Texas is crazy and really cool to see. And I think Georgia will get there. Georgia is definitely a football place for sure.
Right.
Not that other sports don't get investment, but like football is clearly the driver, and it'll go. But man, it's definitely been cool to see that different type of football. And I think as a strength coach, I've had a wide variety of athletes, and when you see the different level of football, it's your standards and your expectations kind of change of here's what good football looks like, and here's what's required, and here's what you got to do, and just like that too with the sport coaches you deal with, man, it's their standards and their expectations are different when you're in these type of states.
Oh, absolutely. And you talk about Texas. I grew up in a small town out there for a few years called Coppers Cove.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And, the beauty of Texas is the UIL. The UIL is both the schooling and the coaching aspect. That's their coaches association plus the schooling, the board over all the school. Here in Louisiana, it's not like that. We have the LHSAA and then we have Bessie, which is a totally separate entity. So it's not together. So the investment there is huge, right? And then you move to another state that's, it's getting there, like you said, but it's just as big that they love their football on Friday night.
Yeah.
So,
and that like you were saying, Coach, that UIL and just how it's really just the professionalism, I guess you would say, of like the coaching in Texas, because everybody has to be a teacher to coach.
Right.
Like that's the massive part is the big difference. Is so there's a lot of buy-in because everybody's in the building, man. There's no community coaches. And so it's just a different sort of environment there.
Yeah. And we're full community coaches, man, which I appreciate. Those volunteer guys that come in and coach, they're a huge asset for us. We got a ton of them, but you're limited. Your school is limited to how many you can have on your whole totality of staffs, but they're a vital asset for us. It's just what we got right now. And, one day we'll see if Louisiana catches up.
Yeah,
so the school you're at, is it a big school, small school?
Yeah, I'm at Effingham County, which is right outside Savannah. We are a 5A school. I'm guessing our number here. I'm going to say that we're like around 2,100. Maybe.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that. But we're in 5A, toward the upper half of 5A.
Yeah, and y'all go up to 6A out there. So there's a few schools above them, some schools down here in the South for our listeners that don't know, Alabama goes up to 7A, I believe. 6A, 7A. I know Georgia goes up.
Yeah.
Texas goes up to 6A?
Yeah, 6.
Yeah,
Yep, they
6A.
do 6, and then they do for football, they do
The
like
separate
6A Division 1 and Division 2. So it's
yeah.
really just like 10 state champs.
Yeah, and that wasn't like that when I was growing up there, man. It was just all, they didn't even have 6A then. I think 5A was the highest classification.
Yeah, it waters it down a little bit.
Yeah, over here, so we have, we go up to 5A, but it's the select, non-select is what they call it.
Mm-hmm.
So schools that it used to be private, public, but now it's select, non-select, to where it's the schools that kind of are in parishes or counties for y'all, but parishes that are open enrollment. Even if you're a public school, you fall into select because kids can go to that school versus not. So we're a non-select school. We're a traditional public school. We're a community school. We're a real public school that every 3 years, we're going to kind of lose a bit.
Yeah.
This year we got 44 seniors. So It's a massive, massive kids that just stuck with it. So a little bit of that. But look, man, you talk about your college time, you talked about the high school time, you spent a lot of time in different places. What's the biggest misconception that coaches might think about one or the other, whether it's college or high school? You've had both of those realms and you get to see both of them, whether that's a high school coach, in college, you get all the unlimited resources, or, a college coach, like, man, it's just high school football. Like, it ain't that big of a deal. What's that common misconception that people see or hear?
At this point, I think for high school is that misconception wise is that it's a lot easier than it is. And what I mean by that is, if you're working, let's say you're working middle school through 12th grade, man, it's a whole wide variety of kids you got to coach, and you're going to have all kinds of different levels of athletes, as we know. And I've said this before, and we've all kind of said it. I still think one of the best tests for a strength coach is, can you teach a 12-year-old non-athletic kid to do an RDL?
Coach, that is I say that all the time too, man. Like, that is by far, like, if you can do that, you can do anything.
Yep.
I feel.
And so if you can do that, man, because if you can RDL, it opens up, they can squat.
Right.
It's just like opens up for whatever reasons, opens it up. And I think that's probably a big thing. But at the same token, though, is like there's from coaches' side, I think you got a lot of high-level coaches in high school that are legit dudes that are choosing to be in high school, and it's funny when coaches ask me, do you want to go back to college? No, I don't.
Yeah.
I like my schedule. I like the setup, but, I like the pay and all that. I just like high school better. At the same time, though, I think with college is I would argue, the misconception of that looking into college is that it's also easier than it looks. You've got crazy schedules and high expectations. And if you're, depending on what program you're with, there's winning and losing involved, like legit winning and losing involved of your job or not having your job. And there's different stresses and just the total time. And both have their perks, both have their negatives, and they're both unique. But, the simple part of college, I think, especially if you're working with the Division I kids and those higher up kids, is they are easier to coach in that the movements are easier for them to grasp. They can kind of pick stuff up pretty quickly. But at the same time, man, some of those kids are some pretty high level kids, and they may not want to listen to what you want to do. They kind of got their own thing that they want to do because some trainer down the street said this was better. And you get that in high school too. I literally had that talk today with our team. Something I say all the time is you can't be a prophet in your own town. It's a nice little scripture there, and it's so spot on in that, Coach Ron, you might post something on Instagram and my kids are going to be like, Coach Garner, why aren't we doing that? Or, hey, I saw this. And if this coach an hour away is doing this, well, it's got to be better than what we're doing. The best coach is never in front of you. It's always the one down the street. And, you battle that in college, and you definitely battle it in high school. And, I'm kind of ranting on this.
But it's, I get it too, man, all the time, and what my biggest fight is when it comes to social media? Tsunami bars. And it's not that I have anything against them. I don't have anything against them, but guys, we're 14 to 18 years old. Like, let's master the basics first. I can't even get y'all to do, some days are better than others, but I can't even get y'all to do every single set and rep to your full intent, much less going to get a tsunami bar and put a bunch of weight on it to see our stability. Like, I fight the same battle, man. I'm sure most of them do. But like you touched on the college kids, and kind of something that's always stuck with me, even as a young strength coach, when Scott Cochran said he's got Lamborghinis and just got to put spinners on them. That's what, it's two different realms, right? You get, I don't want to say ready-made kids, but there's a reason they're going there. There's a reason they're the 2%ers that make it there.
Well, I think, and you make a great point there, and especially with NIL and how things are working in that ranks. I mean, you're going to get half your team might be new, or the whole team might be new. And so in terms of development and in terms of, holding a standard and those expectations that you're kind of used to doing as a strength coach, you might not be able to kind of be that same type of dude.
Because you don't know who's who and what they know coming in, right? And
correct.
It's a little bit different.
And if you're, for some kids, and especially now, it's like, man, if you're too hard and you don't have that relationship, they're like, dude, I don't want to be here, see ya. And it's just part of it. And it's the same, but it's the same thing in high school in terms of, you can't push kids enough unless you got a, good relationship with them and that type of deal. It's the same thing. But I think in college, that's exceptionally elevated now. And on top of that, like I said, with those new, all those new kids coming in, man, there's no time to wait. Like, you've got to develop. And it's hard to start that when you don't know anything about those kids.
Right. And I think that, especially at the collegiate level, like you said, with the transfer portal, the strength coach was already one of, if not the most important person to those kids, because they see them more than anyone else. But now it's even more, because that could be the make or break on a kid staying there. Is, I have a great relationship with the strength coach, and maybe the grass might not be greener on the other side. Maybe I'm going to go into a situation that, like you said, they do stuff totally different, and it might not jive with how I feel and how I do things. So, without outright saying they're the most important person, that they definitely turn into one of the most important people within your staff and on campus now.
Yeah. And I think, and for, high school's the same way at the end of the day, especially if you get these positions that you're legitimately get to work with everybody, just like college, but especially high school, you are the only person that sees everybody. And you're such a, I still think that our role as a high school strength coach is you're such a huge culture developer of the athletic department, in that you are the one consistent coach they will see every day, through the year, that you can really impact a kid in terms of their thought process and what they want. And obviously they're going to see their coaches, but man, if you do it right, like, the strength coach is going to have a massive impact on that school in terms of expectations and standards.
Well, yeah. And so you're trying to build the totality of the strength program at your school, and talking about that, you just kind of hit on it, but what's something that's maybe not in the weight room, like a non-physical trait that you try and instill in your athletes, or something to get them to believe in to help build that?
Yeah, I think it's there's mindset. It's just attitude and mindset of it does not matter how you feel today. we've still got to do something, and we've still got to work, and it cannot be this, what got me better, what worked last week is working this week. Like, there's got to be this mental edge that you kind of develop of something I tell the kids all the time, and it's a great book. It's called Chosen Suffering. And that every single day, man, we've got to choose to suffer. It's a gift that we get to choose to come to practice. We get to choose to come lift. We're choosing these suffering, quote unquote, suffering items that aren't really, it's not suffering. It's just what it takes to win and be successful and maximize your potential. And I think that's the edge with our high school kids that you've really got to, that I push a lot, because the weight room is going to reward you for your work, but it's also at the standpoint of, you've got kids that are great athletes that are able to just beat dudes and they didn't necessarily need to train. But you've also got to reach those kids and understand that, hey, look, man, you are a great route runner, or you're a great this now. Imagine if you would just dedicate a little bit and, hey, you're 20 pounds heavier. You're running faster and 20 pounds heavier. And now what can you look like? Are you that much better? And when it comes to any college aspirations, that's just kind of part of the process. And I always remind our guys, because we've got some legit athletes at our school, of, if y'all have any desire to do anything collegiately, I don't care what level it is, like, you can't skip reps. You can't skip, like, it's not a voluntary, and especially if you're at a D1 place and you got 5 strength coaches, in one setting, and it's only a group of 30, like, you think you're going to just kind of hide behind the cracks and do what you want.
And that's why I wish, with the, NCAA open up the rules where they can visit in the summertime and all that. Like, I wish they would bring them in for that type of stuff. They don't know unless they see it for themselves. Like, we can tell them all day long, but until you see it, like, this is really it. It is a business.
Yeah.
Their jobs are,
and the kids don't believe you.
No, they don't. Their jobs rely on you performing, and then we're the craziest people in the world they're a little crazier than us, relying on 18 to 22-year-old kids that determine whether they get millions of dollars or not. But, we're just as crazy in that sense, but they really don't know, man. Until they know.
Yeah. And especially now, obviously with NIL, and it's awesome. And eventually that stuff's going to clear up in terms of, like, there's got to be contracts or something, I don't know, not going down that rabbit hole, but eventually it's going to be something along those lines. And, like, dude, you're an employee, and, like, man, you've got to do this. And there's 50 other guys that want to transfer out, to come somewhere and get playing time. Like, they'll do it. And
it's
so
crazy to me. Every year there's more kids in the portal than there are available. Yep. So it blows my mind. It really does.
Yep. And it's getting that, again, that mentality of every day we got to come work, we got to do something. It doesn't matter who we're playing and all that kind of stuff, man. Nothing drives me more nuts than when we raise or lower our standard just based off of who we got coming up. It doesn't matter. Every opponent is nameless and faceless.
Yeah. So geographically talking, you've been in all these different spots, and I know you're still fresh to Georgia. You've only been there a few weeks now, about a month and a half. Coming up on 2 months.
Got here beginning of July, so got about 2 months under the belt.
About 2 months. Do you see stuff culturally, even though it's kind of all in the same region, that south to southeast part of the United States, but culturally, do you see some similarities or differences in those states as far as their athletic approach to things?
Yeah, so I think that, man, I think that's anywhere, right? It's totally community based and past success and what that looks like. The school I was at in Cleburne, historically, in Texas, Cleburne, historically, not a super great football program. They'd had success and they've won 2 state championships. Like, they've had success at different divisions. And, now they're in a 5A division and their district's always brutal. Like, it's going to be hard to compete at that level. And just based off your demographics, like, it is very interesting on that end. And again, I think that has way more to do just community to community. Across the board, right? And
Texas might be a little bit more spread out, right?
Yeah, and your demographics are going to make a huge part of that. Like in Texas, I was in a 50% Hispanic, 50% white community, basically 5% Black. It was just half and half there, and so Hispanic population, just the sports side of things, like growing up, it's like, man, they're just working and they got to make money, and that's what they're doing, and that's what they're here for. The sports side was it's something nice that we can do. Now, all those kids worked hard. Like, it wasn't any of that, but it was just more of family-wise
thing.
Yeah, it's a secondary thing, and that's and there's nothing wrong with that. It's totally fine.
No, absolutely, man. I'm Hispanic myself, and that's kind of how it was growing up, man. It's just hard work came first and sport was second. So in the sense of hard
those
work
kids
was
work.
grades, my goodness, do they?
And
We,
those kids work and is set, but like you're saying, a secondary. Now here's a little different where I think it's much more primary, but it's way more about, here's your opportunities. Like you've got opportunities to go do something if you want to go do it. And it's just the work and the level. But yeah, I think it has way more to do with, the family upbringing and what those standards are, and culturally, community, what that looks like.
Right. Yeah. It's crazy to see, you've met people from all different walks of life being in all these different states, and that's amazing to see. And I'm sure it makes you just that much better of a coach day in and day out, that you've met all these different people and experienced all these different things.
For sure. And I think it's been really cool. That was something that, I went to Florida. I was at a private school. And so that was a little bit different environment. I hadn't been in a private school, hadn't dealt with that. And that's got its own, positives and negatives of what you deal with there. Going to Texas was, I was seeing 1,000 kids a week. You got all kinds of all different types of, 7th grade through 12th grade, 1,000 kids a week, but all kinds of families and backgrounds and what have you. Here in Effingham, it's the same way. My wife is biracial, so she's black and white. And so, just all of those different backgrounds, man, you really learn to appreciate everyone and kind of just what they bring. But I think the biggest thing for me is, I'm not going to change what my standard is and what my expectation is, right, on each kid. Now, there's a caveat to that, in that I've also got to understand that each kid at home, they're all going to have their own unique things they're going through and what they're dealing with. And hey, I might, this one kid I may have, let's say, the home life isn't great and they've been sleeping on a couch for 6 weeks, going house to house. Like, I can live with the kid being a little pissed off with me in the morning. Like, if you got a little bit of you know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah, you just don't know.
It's just like there's things like that you got to know and account for.
And as much as you try as a strength coach, man, because you do get to see all these kids in these different walks of life, as much as you try. And something I tell our kids is, when you walk in this building, you're a racehorse. You got to put your blinders on. Like, get rid of everything else and just give me this 50 minutes to an hour of just everything you have and the intent with everything. And I promise you'll feel better when you leave.
Yeah. And that's always something, man. And for me, especially in season, is like, you've got to be flexible and just of how kids feel, naturally from playing and whatever. And I'm always very open with the kids of, if you got something that doesn't feel great, hey, let me know. Or you got something going on, let me know. Let's just tell me. But don't get into this workout and then you're dragging or you're doing this. And now I'm mad because you're not doing what you need to do.
Or you're getting hurt and it makes us look like,
correct.
Oh, here we go. A kid got hurt in the weight room, and no fault to anyone.
No. And I had that happen the week before our first game. A kid, we're doing front squats, heavier front squats, and he tweaked something in his like upper back. And he had some back stuff and it was something similar to that. And, but I told the guys, I was like, look, we're not hitting like a true, triple, like leave some reps in the tank, this and that. Now, for background, is all of my kids here at Effingham, man, they lift really well and they lift hard, and they're used to doing like 5-3-1 every day, getting after it. Like, and that's awesome. And it's great. And I'm all for it, baby. But when we're in season, I'm going to adjust that a little bit.
Right.
And so when I'm telling them like leave reps in the tank, they don't quite know what that means yet. It's a learning curve.
Yeah.
And
balls to the wall every day. Yes. You can't quite,
And hey, I love having to bring it in. It's really not, it's fine.
It's a lot easier than having to pull it out of them.
Yes. And so this kid, and he's a senior for us and he's a great kid, he did that. Now the set before, I told him, let's call it there. That looked good and let's call it. And he said, no, coach, it was easy. I'm like, nah, that looked pretty hard. And he's like, it's easy. Let me get another one. I was like, all right, if you think it's good. He went up like, I don't know, 10 pounds and then boom, that was it.
And that's one of my, you talk about that. And I guess this is a little bit of a philosophy of programming. Some of my background is that powerlifting world because it's huge in this state. And I understand the concept of RPE, but for a 15 to 18-year-old kid, that's hard to understand. An RPE for you at, 5 might be an RPE for me at 10. I don't know that, but they just quite don't grasp that concept that, their RPE 6 is truly a grinder, that they're only getting 2 or 3 reps when they're supposed to get 5 or whatever it is. And That's kind of what messes me up about that concept, even though I do understand it and I appreciate it. And I think it's for experienced lifters, not your novice lifter.
No. And if for a novice kid, man, if I don't have, I don't have VBT, then we're hitting percentages, baby. And we're going to keep it running.
Yeah.
And because what I've kind of learned with our guys is to them, until they fail, it's not heavy enough. You know what I mean? Like if they're not failing, it's not a good day at the gym. And I had to keep reminding them that right now at this time of year, I don't want to see you fail at all, because if something happens, now we're kind of out of luck and I'm getting yelled at because something happened in the weight room.
Yep. Going into week 3, that's not the thing you want to happen.
And I'm going to be distraught for 2 weeks thinking, what did we do wrong? And I got to fix this X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about your time at Florida, or in Florida, not at Florida. I'm sorry. In Florida, and during that time you were assistant athletic director, and you got to kind of see the whole athletic program in its totality, and help day to day, whether it's with tennis or volleyball or football, boys basketball, whatever it is. Does that help you, or did that help you in your philosophy of becoming the strength coach you are today?
Yeah, I think so. And so, I've always said, man, I think the 2 best potential athletic directors in any athletic department are your athletic trainer and your strength coach, because those are the only 2 coaches and people that have to interact with everyone. They're if a basketball coach becomes an AD, they didn't have to interact with the golf coach. They didn't have to build the relationships with every single program and every single kid across the board. And it's, as you can appreciate, man, it's hard to get everybody in an athletic department to be on board with what you want to do.
Oh,
There's a lot of trust. And
you go from having, one boss as a sport coach to 15 bosses as a strength coach or athletic trainer.
And you got to get them all. It's hard to get them all on board with what you want to do. And so when you get into, if you have those type of AD type of positions, man, all it is relationship building. At the end of the day, it's relationship building, and it's communicating. And I think as strength coaches and athletic trainers, you're just naturally for that, and you naturally do that. And so just in terms of being a strength coach, I think in that role, for me, it fits. I mean, long term, I want to be an AD. That's what I want to do way down the line. And so in that position, though, I think the nuances that I kind of picked up was there's a lot more to some of the decisions being made than what you kind of realize, if you're asking for some money for, whatever you want, like, well, where's that money going to come from? How are we going to move it around if you don't already have a predetermined budget and things along those lines? And, that was something that really helped me in Texas, was that, before, when I got to Texas, the strength department didn't have a budget. There was no, and my position was new. They'd never had a budget before. And you've got to be able to go into a meeting with your AD and all those people and explain, why do I need this? Here's this report, all that type of paperwork stuff. And it's got to be clean. You got to be able to speak the language, and you got to sell your vision. And if you've been in an AD spot, like, that's all you're doing is you're selling your vision, you're selling what you want. And you got to do all these little background things of, I was running concessions, like I was doing concession stuff all the time. I was doing gate and, the things that aren't glamorous. But you learn those things, and it's like, do you really like doing this? Do you not like doing this? All those things kind of add up. But kind of answered your question and kind of didn't. But
you do a lot more of the servant leadership stuff.
It's just being a servant leader in those roles, man, 100%.
And that's, like, I believe that too, man. Like, athletic trainers, strength coaches, they make great ADs because, like you said, they are able to interact with every single person on campus, and they're just the natural speakers and I don't want to call it nurturers, but just the natural people that are a part of that,
Well, and if you're used to being, I think the biggest thing is you want to, if you come from that type of position into an AD role, you're not fighting a preconceived notion of, oh, this guy's only going to care about football.
Right.
Or this guy's only going to care about basketball or whatever, because you clearly have cared about everybody. And so you kind of naturally give that even sort of love to your teams in that role.
Yeah. So when you deal with sport coaches, man, like, is there, no matter what sport it is, the term old school coach and new school coach, and, you mentioned VBT, and that really wasn't a thing. It's been a thing, but it's not a thing that everybody realized was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So do you get some of that pushback, or what kind of wisdom do you drop on the, old school sport coach to kind of help them and sell that things that are modern or helpful?
Yeah. So, I'll lead off with this, in that coincidentally, I have had my last 3 football coaches, man, and my current one is they're fantastic. I mean, they are so easy to work with. They let me do my job. Like the coach in Texas was like, yeah, man, this is your show. You do what you want. Coach Ford here in Effingham, same thing. Florida with Coach Moore, same thing. Like I've had great experience with football coaches, but and I've had a lot of buddies that haven't had great experiences. And so I think the part when you're trying to get people on board with what you do, this is something that I think arrogantly that I think I do very well.
Yeah.
I think I do well.
And everybody has their niche, man. Like,
yeah, I think that's something I do well of establishing, because if you can, we'll count this Effingham as one of these places, but of getting a strength department started, like where there hasn't been somebody that trained everybody, and like you really want to train everybody. This would be the third time I'm doing it. And so that means, number one, I got to get everybody to like me.
Mm-hmm.
They got to be on board with and trust me with what we're doing. And I think when you're dealing with people that, hey, I want to do it this way, when you come into a new spot, you might have some different things that you want to do that they're not used to. You've got to give them like 80% of what they're used to, what they're familiar with. And because, bench, squat, deadlift, if you're a powerlifting place, if they want to clean. So we don't do cleans. I'm not against cleans. I just got to the point where I have other things I want to do. And, but that was something with Coach Ford here. They were a big clean program before I got here. And I had told him in the interview process, and I was like, look, man, we're not going to clean. And so if you want to clean, just know that I'm probably not the right guy. And I explained why and had my reasons. He's like, that sounds good to me. Fine. We don't need to do it. And so, but getting those old school people on board, I think you need to show a proof of concept in that what's familiar with some of your new things. And then as you start building trust, you start adding in the things that you want to do when there's trust involved. Because eventually there's going to come a point of, okay, Coach Garner's not an idiot. He knows what he's doing. Here's what it is. And so, like, I'll give an example here. It happened last week and the week before in our training cycle, especially our in-season cycle, I have it down to where I can tell our kids during this 2-week window, you've got a great chance to PR a sprint.
Uh-huh.
And on the lasers. And I think that's a huge thing for me. I'll talk about that later. But I told them 6 weeks ago when I first got here in July, I said, hey, the first week of the season and the second week of the season are going to be our fastest weeks we've had and out of all summer. And I've been timing their sprints since week 1. So week comes up. Hey, I said at least half our guys are going to PR today. 49% PR'd. Okay. Next. And we go through the week. And then we came into Monday and I said, okay, at least 25% of our guys are going to PR this week. 47% PR'd.
Yeah.
I got them.
Yeah.
Like,
and then you got them hooked because, okay, Coach is right. Coach Garner, we trust him now that, what he says holds true.
Like as soon, and like I was putting it on the line. Like I did, I said this crap 6 weeks ago and I kept reminding them that this is going to happen. And what was funny is that last week we were doing squats, we were doing like a power squat on Monday, and some of the guys decided they don't want to follow the percentages. And so, we have that conversation of like, you follow these percentages. This isn't a suggestion. Like, well, it's easy. I know it's easy. It's 70%, baby.
There's a rhyme and a reason to it.
There's a rhyme and a reason. And so then afterwards is where I told the guys, I was like, I said, I'm going to put it on the line now. Tomorrow, over 25% of y'all going to PR sprints tomorrow, as long as we did what we needed to do. And then boom, 47%. So like, and not to sound like a jerk, but I told the guys the next day, I said, have you ever had a strength coach tell you that you're going to PR your sprint this specific time frame? No. Okay. So let's, do what we need to do. And here we are.
Yeah. Let's continue this train rolling.
Correct. Let's keep it going, do what we need to do. And so like with stuff like that, man, I think that's where like you get the coaches, an old school coach per se, like bought in of like kind of call your shot.
Yeah.
And here's what you need. And boom, there you go.
And that does nothing for the kids, but gets them to believe in other things where, seeing is believing, I guess, but speaking stuff into reality that, all right, guys, you did this. What if I told you we follow this the whole year, you listen to coach and we're winning a state championship? That's that stuff that's the foundation of those state championships. I tell our kids all the time, good days stacked together equal great days and great days equal state championships. And that's just something that if you believe it and build that foundation of, you're going to do this and the sky's the limit at that point, right?
And I think to your point on that, coach, is like teaching the guys. It goes back to my original point. It doesn't matter who we're playing. None of that matters. It's all in your process of maximizing your potential. And as long as we maximize our potential, man, the results are going to be the results. But, we can live with that, whatever happens.
Right. So you've started a bunch of different programs, right? In 3 different states, 3 different types of kids, 3 different cultures. If you're just now starting, let's just say for a young coach, we kind of talked about that old school coach, but as a young coach, if you're just starting in that setting, whether it's a mistake you made or a mistake you've seen, there's some common mistakes, and advice to these young coaches on how to correct those or avoid those mistakes.
But yeah, I think it goes back to the point of don't come in somewhere and try to blow it all up.
Right.
Familiar with what they've done before, and you got to be flexible. You can't be just, here's what we're doing. There's some things you got to be flexible about. And I always ask our coaches, man, is there anything you want to see, or is there anything you don't want to see? And I've only had one coach tell me, at our baseball coach in Cleburne, said, I don't want to shoulder press. I said, okay, that's fine. If that means you're going to buy into everything else.
Right.
Personally, I would shoulder press them. But if you don't want to do it, okay. And of course, they were one of my best lifting teams in Cleburne. And it's like, great. And if that little thing right there, got some buy-in to it. And as a young coach, again, just don't come in too hot and heavy thinking like you're the smartest and greatest coach there is, and be humble to learning and what you want to do. The programs I was doing, fresh out, baby, are not what I would do now.
You took the words right out of my mouth,
Yep.
man, because I look back at some of the stuff even 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and I'm like, why did I ever do this? Like, this is stupid.
And like the kids ask me all the time, they're like, when are we going to clean here? I'm like, guys, we're not. And now, for the record, we do snatch. We don't clean, but we do snatch. And I'm like, guys, we're not going to clean. I'm sorry. And so when they're kind of depressed on that, but as I tell them why, and they're learning all these things, they're like, all right, that's fine. We'll get over it, I guess.
Yeah, we understand. And hey, you got us. You called your shot above 25%. So why wouldn't we believe you, right?
And for the record, like, and I tell the kids, and this was going to be my point, is like, I tell the kids all the time, I was like, yeah, dude, I used to be big on clean.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. And I've switched to something else. And it's just, I'm not against it. It's just for you guys in our setting, I think this is better. And
right.
So, and they're like, all right, cool.
And the snatch, man, we're talking about probably the most explosive.
Yep.
So,
and that's why and I think it's so much easier for kids to pick up a snatch than a clean.
Yeah.
And just the speeds of it and that type of deal. And they were already snatching before I got here. And so that was something that I was going to we weren't doing it in Texas, but I was going to add to it in Texas. And then just this job happened and they were already snatching. So that's why it's in our program now.
Easy transition, right? It's kind of like, I got kids all the time that want a sumo deadlift,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not against sumo deadlift, man. I like the time under tension is much better, but
Mm-hmm.
what's easier to teach? A conventional deadlift where we're gripping and ripping and there's a lot less get into our wedge and making sure that
Mm-hmm.
everything's tight and, we're pushing while we're pulling,
Mm-hmm.
it's a little bit easier, low hanging fruit, just like the snatch, there's a little less moving parts, that
For
a little
sure.
bit easier to teach. So
That's why you start with that RDL and it cleans up everything.
absolutely, man. The RDL is the basis of everything. That hinge in those hips is the basis. And, everything from there, from the snatch pull to, the triple extension into the catch. I mean, everything starts with that RDL. It's all the same
Mm-hmm.
movement. So you talked a little bit about VBT, man. Obviously you have some of those devices at your school or where you've been at,
Mm-hmm.
but if you don't, let's just say you're at a place on a budget, with limited resources. What's something, whether it's a piece of equipment, training philosophy, a non-negotiable that, it's a creative workaround to some of this stuff, whether you want to take VBT or something else philosophical within the weight room?
Yeah. So I think if I got a minimum budget, then and I've got some sort of money, I'm going to figure out a way to get a laser somehow, some way for time sprints. Because jumps are cool and I like jumps, and like we broad jump, we measure, you just put a tape line down and we do the broad jumps. So that's a very safe and effective one.
Yeah.
VBT wise, VBT is nice to have, just use a watch, 5 seconds, gives me reps you can, that type of stuff. The thing about VBT that at least I've learned from Texas was like, what VBT taught me is that it allowed me to dial in my percentages better.
Yeah.
For specific movements.
It's more true. It gives a more true number.
So like for deadlift speeds and squat speeds and bench speeds of like, hey, I actually need to be at this percentage for what I want. And it's not what I thought it was. That's why I've liked VBT, because now my percentages are different when I don't have it. And so, yeah, stopwatch for the VBT stuff, broad jump, tape line, very easy. And again, if I had any sort of money, man, it's a laser. And I say that over like a jump something, vertical jump something, because it's hard for people to conceptualize a jump increase. It's very easy for coaches to understand sprint speed.
Yeah.
And kids too.
It's a lot more low-hanging fruit there.
Low-hanging fruit. Like if a kid goes from a 24 to a 26 vert, like it's up, but that doesn't mean anything to them for a lot of them, unless they're a basketball player or a volleyball player. But if I take any other athlete and, we go from a 40, that's a 5 flat 40 to a 4.9. They're like, heck yeah. They're they just, speed is just easier to understand than the jumps per se. And so that would just be my thing, is where I get instant buy-in from the laser over jumps. Personally, if I got any sort of money, that's what I would do.
And I think a lot of that just goes back to being a kid, right? Everybody wants to be fast.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wants to be the fastest kid in the neighborhood. Who could care less if, oh man, I can jump up and touch that tree branch and you can't, but I'm faster than you. Like, I think that goes back to that kid part, that everybody wants to see themselves fast.
Yeah, and I think the part that I love, man, is when because like obviously, we, like everywhere, we do a bunch of fly times and things like that, is that when you start to get some of these big guys getting real close to like some of these kind of athletic kids with the fly times.
Yeah.
And that's when it gets fun. Of like, we had one of our left tackles in Texas. Before I left, he ran a sub 540, but he ran a 109 or 108 fly time with a 20-yard lead. And so, which was faster than some of our not linemen, and everybody was losing their minds.
It just breeds competitiveness, right?
Yeah,
those
man.
kids, like, they want to push themselves, and it goes back to our intent talk. You push yourself to be more intentional in everything you do, because, all right, man, why is this guy starting to get close to me? Why is he creeping up? Why am I not seeing what he's doing in my own training?
Coach, that's such a good point that you said that, because I had that talk today. And I've got a couple of kids, man, it's like their fly time's not moving. And I'm like, brother, I watched you. I've been watching you in weights. You ain't been pushing it.
Yeah.
But these guys are. And these are kids that are deemed as fast on our team, that are getting passed up by kids that may not be deemed as fast.
Who's been the traditional slow kid.
Yeah, and they're flying. And I'm like, this kid's faster than this kid, I'm telling you. And of course, we'll do some things to prove that point. But anyway, I digress. Yeah, it just happens all the time, man.
Yeah. So at your new school, and I'm sure being a community school back in Texas, you probably saw more of this, but at your new school, multi-sport athletes, is that a huge thing?
Honestly, I feel, yes, there's some, obviously you're going to get some multi-sport kids, man, but I feel like when you get to these big schools, these 5A and 6As, you get way more one-sport athletes than multi-sport, because you got to be a real good athlete to really participate at a high level at multiple sports at a big school.
Yeah.
When you're at smaller schools, you've got a better opportunity to excel based off your population.
Things, right. Yeah.
Based off your population. But if I got, 2,200 kids to choose from, like, it's tough to be a starter on football, basketball, and baseball.
Yeah.
If you do all those things, like, you can, it's just hard. And so I think, man, you see so many more single sport athletes, obviously for a variety of reasons with all that. But no, I mean, you certainly get some of those multi-sport kids. There's definitely more here than there was in Texas, because in Texas, because everything's so year-round in Texas and the setup, that it's really hard to be a multi-sport athlete, I think, in Texas compared to other places.
Yeah, our schools are about the same size. We got about 2,600 kids. We see a lot of that football, baseball, or we see a lot of that volleyball, softball, to where it's, 2 different seasons. We do have a lot of basketball, football guys, but that's not the norm. It's just kind of these back-to-back classes that had the basketball, football guys, or we have some girls basketball and volleyball going on. It's not the norm that usually happens. And then track's just kind of everyone, or powerlifting's everyone that played a fall sport. But, talking about the multi-sport thing, how would you handle a athlete who's in multiple sports in a single season? Let's say, basketball and baseball has some crossover. And I've dealt with some of these athletes before in my time. How would you deal with that? And are there different priorities when it comes to strength and conditioning for that athlete?
Yeah, so I'm very much a percent of our program is going to be the same, no matter what. Like, it's, with the high school kid, at least just my belief in that, 80% of what we do is going to be really similar across the board, no matter what sport you do. And then there's going to be that little bit of a 20% difference when it comes to, say, some accessories and some injury type of areas where we want to put on muscle mass, that type of thing. But for most of the high school kids, that's the same. They kind of need it in the same spots.
Yeah.
And so with those multi-sport kids, especially with the season overlap, for me personally, especially like if it's coming from, like you said, the end of another sport, we're going to the end of basketball into baseball, that we're going to make sure we finish out with the basketball stuff before I worry about the baseball. And it's really not going to be that big of a difference other than like basketball to baseball. Baseball, I'm just going to make sure that we're doing a good bit of upper back shoulder work and we're maintaining a good bit of that T-spine mobility. Like that's just going to be the two big things that I hammer, which in basketball, we're still doing shoulder work, still going to be some T-spine, but not to the level of baseball. And so for me, I just make sure I finish out their current end of season before they kind of transition into heading into baseball. But because 80% of it, I'm touching a little bit of everything, I'm not too worried when they go into their sport. For me, it's really more the conditioning side that, where it might get it gets different. But, for a basketball kid going to baseball, like, man, they're in shape. They're ready. Like, they ain't got to worry about it.
You're running much farther than 90 feet in basketball.
Yeah, so they're going to be fine. So I'm not too worried. It's more like let's say a football kid going to basketball. Like that's going to be that's a different conversation.
Oh yeah, I see our kids all the time going from, because I mean, unless you're intentional about it and you do it as the strength coach or as a sport coach where you're sprinting that 3 days a week outside a game, or doing a little bit of conditioning, they don't really get it. And I see our basketball guys our football guys going over to basketball, and they're just like, those first few weeks they're kind of sucking wind, and there's a lot of rotation until they kind of get in shape after Thanksgiving or after Christmas break. So
it takes a good 6 weeks.
Oh yeah, man. And they they feel it, and I love it, man. I love being a part of that transition, I guess you could say, from one sport to the other and seeing how they react, and call it a fight or flight mode, right? They're not used to,
sure.
They just go from, let's just say, football to where, man, everything was easy. I just played call it 12-week season. And now I'm jumping into a 36-game season, and you kind of see that fight or flight mode where they're not used to, being under the pressure of the conditioning and having to make it a whole game. So
yeah, very different expectations.
Yeah, man, I love that part of it because you see what the kids are made of. And I think that's great. So, talking about these sports and talking about everything that goes into them, and whether it's conditioning or in the weight room, is there something that in all your time doing this, the past 11, 12 years, that's just impressed you so much that you learned or saw that you immediately integrated it into your program?
I think just totally generally speaking, it's really I think the jump stuff, you get some good jump stuff and you get some good kind of ankle foot stuff. That's not a massive part of our program in terms of the ankle foot. I mean, obviously we do things, but I think there's a lot of good jump stuff out there. But what really gets me interested is ways to get kids faster that wasn't through more sprinting, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, if I just had a kid sprint more, he's gonna get a little faster. But at the end of the day, we still have to, at least this is my belief, is that you still got to raise the relative strength of a kid to improve the speed. And it's got to be done thoughtfully. It's got to be smart, and it's got to be done in a way that, kind of like I said earlier, if you can start like predicting kids' times, and you can start saying, if you get to this is probably where you'll be. Like that's the type of stuff I get interested in. And so you've got a few coaches out there of like, they're doing certain things and the speed's getting better, but they're not, sprinting 20 times a week.
Right.
It's this lifting stuff gets better. That's showing up. So that's the stuff that really interests me, that I've seen and I've implemented in our training, to where that sprint time is getting better, and we're only sprinting once a week. That's just what we're doing. The lasers once a week. So it's not more sprinting, it's just showing up and we got to go run.
Right.
And
doing it the right way at the right volume.
Correct. Yeah. Doing it the right volume, the right intensities, the right speeds with that jump stuff. And like our current weight room is a little tough in that there's not exactly room for a ton of jumping. Like we'll do some dumbbell jumps and we'll go in the hallways for broad jumps. Eventually we will not have that problem, but right now the sprints are moving pretty good. But it's also, man, for my current situation, it's just something new. The kids haven't done it. Like they're going to get faster just because it's new. And as we go, the part that will be fun is when, I've told these kids, and they can all quote me, that what I've told them is, look, I'm trying to take a 10th off your fly time in a year. Like, that's what I'm looking for.
Right.
And ideally more, but I'm looking for a 10th this first year. Now, year 2 is a different conversation, but year 1, it's like, man, we can get a 10th off that fly time. And so, long story short, as far as stealing stuff, man, it's if there's people out there doing good stuff where those sprint times are getting better, and it's on the lifting, jumping side, man, I'm gonna steal it.
Yeah.
And we're gonna try it. We're gonna use it.
You talked about you utilizing every bit, man. I think that's one thing as strength coaches where, and I don't know if you have to do lesson plans or anything like that. I don't know what that looks like for you, but there's always a change in the lesson plan. We utilize every bit of space. The weight room's never big enough, right? Like for us, I don't really have a hallway to go jump in. So we have a big old concrete slab out back that, we got to go jump over there. Or we have, our field's not far from the weight room. It might be 25-ish yards. So it's quick just to go to our little field, get some jumps in or throw the med balls or whatever it is and hurry up back inside. But I think we utilize as strength coaches every resource we can in every bit of space we can in there.
Yeah, and that's the part that I love about high school coaches, kind of to the point earlier, like we were talking about, is like everybody's situation is different, and what your space is and what equipment you have and how you make that work. If you got a tight space and you're getting good results, like I want to know about that efficiency that you have and the flow that you have, and how are you getting this when all I've got is a squat rack and a barbell? What are you doing?
Right.
And being efficient. And that's really, man, where I feel like you take away a lot is, you can talk to 5 high school guys and it's going to be 5 totally different situations. And here's why they do what they do based off their situation, and it just makes it unique and what you can take away from them.
Yeah. So when we talk about success as a whole, in your program or your philosophy or just life in general, because I think people can gain a lot of wisdom from being in the weight room day in and day out. How is that success measured, with your athletes, your program, your life, at the end of the season, how do you measure that success?
For me, it's at least with our kids, man, it's when, and it kind of, we touched on it earlier, is just kind of what's their general attitude like, as we kind of keep working, and how do they start approaching things outside of here, and what's that mindset? Because the weight room in sports is such a great proving ground you can fail and you can try things and you can do things, especially weight room. Like you can try things and fail and it's fine. Like there's
good days and bad days, right? There's some days you might come in there and absolutely kill it. And then 2 weeks later, that same weight, you might not kill it.
Yep. And I think them and getting, being able to see that type of resiliency and that type of flexibility of, okay, today's just not a good day, but I'm still gonna push, I'm still gonna do that, and I think as strength coaches, if a kid gives me like, says something nice to me about like, just says thank you, I can live on that for 6 months. Like, and I've had that happen the past 2 weeks, man. After our first game, a kid came up to me and he said, he just said, Coach Garner, thank you, like you're a program changer. And I tried not to cry. Like I was like a kid, great kid came up to me and said that. And then I had, last week, another kid came up to me, was putting GPSs up, and he just put his arm around me and he said, Coach, this is the best I've ever felt. Thank you so much. And I literally said, don't talk to me right now. I'm about to cry.
Yeah. Dude, it's funny you say that, because like our girls basketball team, from the second I started working them out till now, every single day leaving the weight room, thank you, Coach, for everything you did today. And it just like, they don't realize how much that means, man. Like, because like nobody sees the guy trapped in the weight room all day because you're trapped in there, but that means so much to guys and gals in this profession, that just a simple thank you goes such a long way.
100%. And I'm going to live off of those 2 comments for probably the next year. I don't need anything else, and I'll be good.
I keep every little, like, you get those teacher appreciation letters and notes, and maybe I'm just I guess call it a weird kid. I kept every birthday card growing up. I don't know why. I just did it. But same thing now. I have every single thing a kid's given me, something as little as being on a sticky note, like, John was here, to the thank you notes on Teacher Appreciation Week, and that it just means so much more than what they know.
And what gets me, as you can appreciate, is, like the kid last week, like I've got a good relationship with him, but it's not a kid I talk to all the time.
Right.
And like, he just came out of nowhere. And it's like when you get the random kids that you talk to a little bit, but you might not have a great relationship with, but then you've impacted them in some sort of way, and you just don't know it. And taking that time to write you something, man, is always really big.
No, it's great, man. And that's a great way to define success, man. That's something that you don't really hear often. A lot of people are just like, well, if we can have this kid, running this time or lifting this weight, that's how our record, But I tell people all the time, that's the paycheck. In this profession, we'll always say we never get paid enough, no matter where you're at. Everybody always says it.
Fact.
You never get paid enough, but that's the paycheck sometimes when, those kids hit you up years from now with a wedding invitation or a college graduation invitation, or, that's what makes everything worth it. The time spent away and, the sleepless nights worrying about other people's kids, that makes it the best job in the world.
100%. And yeah, like you said, man, it makes the kids just don't know. They just really don't know how much of an impact that makes.
Yeah. So, man, I got a few off the wall questions for you because I love asking this stuff, man. Like, I'm always interested in getting into the mind of other people and how they think. So let's say you're getting ready for a team competition, no matter what it is. It might be a football game, baseball, anything. And you have to show one movie to that team to kind of get them motivated to play. What movie is that?
Man, okay. So I'll give you two.
Okay.
For me, it's either going to be The Patriot. The Patriot's going to be up there.
Gosh, one of the best.
The Patriot's going to be up there. And then I'll give you three. The Last Samurai is going to be up there. You got to clip out some samurai stuff depending on what you want.
Yeah.
And then naturally, Friday Night Lights is always going to be a great one.
Always.
Walking into the Superdome and going to town. Like that's always going to be a good one.
Yeah, man. That's three great ones, man. The Patriot's just such phenomenal movie, man. I love that.
Aim small, miss small.
Yep. I love that movie. So same question, and it might not necessarily be before competition, but let's just say before season, is there a book that you would recommend like this and gives you everything you need to get ready for competition?
Yeah, I think Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, and then Chosen Suffering. And that Chosen Suffering book, man, is one of the best books I have, and I absolutely love that book. It's by, I think it's Tom Ryan. He's the wrestling coach at Ohio State, and tremendous book. And you talk about reading that book, man. It really helped kind of shape some things for me in terms of just general thought processes. And I think that extreme ownership piece is so huge for our kids now, to where there's not a lot of ownership, taking ownership of your actions, and here's the result, this and that. And I think that's important. And then again, that chosen suffering of, there's unchosen suffering things that happen in our life. Your parents get sick, daughters, whatever, like all those things, I'm never going to choose that to happen, and we're going to go through these things, but what are those chosen things that I'm going to go through to kind of help it reach our goals?
Oh, those are two great ones, man. Jocko has some great stuff too. Jocko has some really good motivational stuff, and people don't realize everything he's done and been through, and kind of how he built what he has today.
For sure.
That's great. Sure. So this next one, man, this is the last one. This has been my favorite question to ask. Okay. So let's say you're on a deserted island, you're stranded there, whether it's you by yourself, maybe you and your wife, or whoever, you and someone else, whether it's something that you can actually use functionally or something that you're truly going to lift with. What's one piece of weight equipment or weight room, something you'd see in a weight room that you would have on that island with you?
I'd have a belt squat, because I can just march all day. Nothing too crazy. If people, you probably want to say, a barbell and weights. I feel like that'd get old really quickly. No, I'd say belt squat would be a good one for me, kind of off the wall thing. And if you made me pick a weight item, I would say power blocks, definitely power blocks.
Man, two I haven't heard yet. I have not heard a belt squat, and I have not heard power blocks. Man, I've heard everything from battle rope, trampoline, barbell, kettlebell. Me, myself, I said trap bar just because of the functionality of it. Barbell, it's going to rust pretty quick and not be able to spin versus a trap bar.
The belt squat's not going to do much either. But.
Right. But just kind of, and I've even had some people say, well, we'll get some coconut oil, we'll make sure that we can keep that bar going, hearing a belt squat, man, that's a good one. I have not heard that one yet.
I'm just a big belt squat guy, man. I love being belt squat.
I wish I had them, man. I'm a trailer strap and weight pin right now.
That's what I used in Cleburne.
Yeah, man. And my kids, they love it, but it's just what you got right now. You got to make chicken salad sometimes. So, man, I cannot, this has been a great episode, man. I loved every second of it, and I can't thank you enough for coming on. Can you tell our listeners, where they can find you on social media?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, X, whatever you'd like to call it.
Yeah.
And Instagram, Coach R. Garner on both. yeah, I mean,
yeah, that's where I
anytime
found you. Like I said, that's where I found
Yeah.
you. I'm reaching out to you. Like our first conversation was just about your dumbbell percentages. How do you get
Yep.
to that point? And that was our first conversation, and just kind of from there, chatting every now and then to get to this point.
Yeah, and it's I've made so many connections and so many friends through Twitter and X and through that, and just made a ton of connections there. I got a bunch of guys in the SAC here that I think you should get them on eventually. I know you talked to Dan yesterday, and some of those guys, man, they're good dudes. And so
yeah, you Georgia guys at the NatCon, man, y'all get after it. Well, I guess I can call you a Georgia guy now, man.
It's the whole it's the whole SEC.
Yeah,
it's
man.
the whole SEC is what it is.
They get after it, man, and they showed
Well,
the
man,
most
and
NWO shirts this year.
Yep. When you with those guys, man, we've been buddies for that whole thing started like 4 years ago, something like that. But it's just good dudes trying to have, having a good time and not taking it too serious, and making those connections. And that's a group. I mean, I'm texting that group every day, and there's serious things, there's not serious things. You throw ideas out there and just bounce stuff off the wall. And some people might get irritated by it, but at the end of the day, guys, like, we're high school strength coaches, and let's have fun with it. And that's kind of what we're here, man. And that's what the organization's for. Like, it's building relationships and doing what we do.
Fun and fellowship, man. That's what it's all about. We have a great
100%.
time. The little group we have from Louisiana, when we go up there, it's just a great time. Kind of get with everyone and have that fun. So again, Coach, man, thank you so much for being on today. Y'all can find Coach's episode coming out soon, and Coach, we'll talk again soon.
That sounds good. Appreciate you, Coach Ryan.
All right, brother.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Moffitt Method Podcast. We hope you found today's discussion enlightening and empowering as you continue your journey in sports and strength and conditioning. Before you go, make sure to follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, where we share more tips, behind-the-scenes content, and updates on upcoming episodes. Just search for Moffitt Method Podcast and hit that follow button. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite listening platform. That way, you'll never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed today's show, we'd love it if you could leave us a review or share this podcast with a friend. It really helps us out. Thanks for tuning in. And remember, the key to success is just one more workout away. Until next time, stay strong and stay inspired.